Welcome to New Beginnings, a podcast exploring the hidden impact of gambling harms on women's lives. I'm Natasha Devon, author, broadcaster, and mental health campaigner. In this series, we've heard from those directly affected by gambling harms. Our guests have shed light on the challenges faced in recovery and, most importantly, shared their stories of hope. This show is brought to you by Bet No More UK, a charity providing peer-led services like New Beginnings, a women's-only service. This podcast is part of the National Gambling Support Network. To find out more, visit www.betnomoreuk.org or contact the free National Gambling Helpline on 0808 8020 133 for 24/7 support. In today's episode, as we mark International Women's Day, we're shining a light on the unique challenges women face in recovery, from navigating stigma to finding spaces that truly understand their experiences. But through the power of community, women are reclaiming their recovery journeys on their own terms. This conversation will explore the barriers that still exist and, more importantly, the ways that we can break them down. As always, I am joined by Lisa Walker, New Beginnings lead facilitator and expert by experience. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Natasha.
We're also joined by a returning guest. You heard from her in the first episode of our new series. Welcome back, Kiki Marriott.
Thank you.
And for the first time, we'd like to welcome Lisa Hines to the show.
Hello.
Hi. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with New Beginnings?
I realised I had a gambling problem. I mean, I've always had a gambling problem. And it hit a crisis point last year. And I reached out to New Beginnings and Lisa contacted me and we discussed it. And I joined a group and we had sessions where I joined in for 10 weeks and it just really, really helped. I didn't really know where to turn. I'd put Gamban on my phone. I wasn't aware that really there were the groups that were available until Lisa contacted me.
That's amazing. And it really does touch on what we're going to be discussing today, actually, that so many women have told us throughout the series that they just didn't know that there were these types of services available, or indeed any services. So let's begin this journey of recovery and hope together. International Women's Day has been making waves since the early 1900s. Over 100 years later, some of the challenges women face may look different, but the fight is far from over. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is Accelerate Action, emphasising the importance of taking swift and decisive steps to achieve gender equality. And today we're looking at how we can accelerate action into recovery from gambling harms. So, Lisa W., let's start with New Beginnings. Tell us why it's so important that a service not only provides for women, but is actually designed with women in mind.
I guess, the reasons behind New Beginnings, from my own sort of personal lived experience, is that when I was gambling, I was so isolated and felt so alone and ashamed. The guilt and the stigma around being a woman. And my only help at the time was through Gamblers Anonymous, which mostly men that go. And so I was trying to navigate a system that where can I turn for help? And there wasn't any. So when I started putting pen to paper and thinking really about what can I do to start sort of helping other women that must be going through the same problems as me, what are the challenges going to be? How are we going to get these women to come to New Beginnings? And then I started to think about certain topics that myself wouldn't feel comfortable talking to men around. For instance, being a woman and going through the menopause, being a full-time carer for my severely disabled daughter, the pressures of being a mum, the pressures of just being a woman with a gambling addiction, because, a lot of people don't recognise that women are addicted to gambling, which they are. And so to be able to sit down and create this New Beginnings and then have the opportunity to start seeing women coming in and getting the support that they really do need, and also breaking down that barrier around the stigma, and then also making sure, like, accelerating that treatment. So when a woman reaches out, that within 24 hours there's a phone call, and that phone call is then led to, we can get you on our cohort, which is starting in so many weeks. But in the meantime, you know, we are going to do check-ins with you. You know, we are going to invite you to our health and wellbeing groups, and just having that lady coming on, and she can really sort of open up and think, I'm not the only person going through it. And I think that's so important, being not alone and knowing that there's other women going through what you're going through.
Well, and grabbing people as well when their motivation is high, because if they have to wait even a week before they get that first phone call or are going to that first meeting, then you don't know where in their journey you're meeting them, do you? We were talking in the green room about, we did an hour on this on my LBC show, and how I don't think any women called in. Oh, no, that's not true. A couple of women called in and said, I work in the gambling industry. The text messages that were coming into the studio, absolutely rife with women saying, "This, you're describing my best friend, you're describing my mum, my sister." There are so many people who have a woman experiencing gambling harms in their life, and yet not one of those women who was personally affected picked up the phone. And what I've realized is there's stigma around addiction, but there's even more stigma around gambling addiction. And then there's even more stigma around gambling addiction for women. Why do you think that is?
Because, like I said before, most people think that it's a male thing, and you know, how can a woman get addicted to gambling? You know, and unfortunately, you know, there is so many women out there, you know, becoming addicted to gambling through, you know, their phones and their tablets, and it's so easy now for women to become addicted. And I think a lot of women, for whatever reason, don't come forward because, you know, if women are carers or they've got children, their jobs, their family, you know, not being able to open up to their family, what are the repercussions going to be? What is the repercussions going to be if I open up to my boss and tell them that I've got a gambling addiction? Am I going to get sacked? You know, there's so many different reasons why women keep it a hidden addiction, because when you think about women, you know, and when a woman's battling with a gambling addiction, I felt so alone and isolated. And I felt like if I come out with my story and people know that I ended up on the streets through my gambling addiction, people are going to think that I am this awful, terrible person and that I'm not fit enough to be a mum, let alone look after my children, let alone have a job, or, you know. And I thought, this needs to change, because I know that I'm a good person, and I know that I have got this illness, and I didn't want to wake up a compulsive gambler. I was just drawn into it, and I had to do it every day. So I thought, I need to now give hope and inspire other women that are going through what I went through, or not even getting to rock bottom like I went through, just to notice that they've just got a problem with gambling and we need to address the issue. And I think having that 24-hour crucial phone call, because when I was gambling, I'd always say the next day, I'm never going to gamble again. And I'd have that time and I'd think, do you know what? Don't worry about yesterday. It doesn't matter. It's not that bad. I only lost so much money. Let's start again today. But if someone would have phoned me up and gone, Lisa, let's have that chat, it might have been completely different. And I never got that.
That's so interesting. And two of the women that you have inspired are sitting here. Kiki, I know that you have had experience of mixed gender services as well. If you had to describe the difference between that and a women's only service, how would you put that into words?
Well, I think when I went into rehab, it was all men. I knew that before I arrived. But I think when you're going to be living for 6 weeks with a good amount of men, it does bring up questions that I probably wouldn't have if it was more women. I was quite lucky, you know, all the men there treated me with such respect and love. But it kind of brought out a whole new set of questions that I didn't have before I knew that. But going into a women's space, it just feels like there's so much more I can talk about, especially like being a mum and kind of wanting to get help for so long, but feeling like I could never have done that because I would have been scared about outside services getting involved or people judging me, and just really being seen as weak, because as a mum you're supposed to be super strong, have it all together, and as a mum you just can't really be seen to have weaknesses, you know what I mean? So for me, being in a space where there was other mums who'd made similar mistakes like I have along the years, it just makes you feel so validated and understood. And also to understand that I'm not a gambling addict because I'm weak. I'm a gambling addict because I suffer from an illness. Yeah. I'm truly understanding that, and just learning more about that. Yeah, so it was really big help.
And Lisa H, you've spoken about some of the issues that you faced finding help. I wonder, can you talk us through those first steps towards recovery and maybe what it was like, you know, that first phone call with Lisa W and your first meetings? What was that like for you?
I always felt it felt such a secret for me. I always felt so ashamed. There was always the stigma of women gambling because it was, you know, she must be a terrible mother. She must be this terrible person. And that voice in my own head that told me the same things that I'd heard. And I had got some money from the sale of a property that was going down very, very quickly. And I knew my addiction was getting worse. The amounts I was gambling were getting bigger. And the amount of shame I felt around that. So I went online. It was like, what is there? I knew about Gamblers Anonymous. I'd been to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I was the only woman there. It didn't feel comfortable for me. And so I reached out and Bet No More came on and I made contact. And as you were saying, it needed to be then, because give it a couple of hours, my head would have talked me out of it. It needs to be in that moment. And Lisa contacted me and I opened up to her about the feelings I had around my own addiction. And it was somebody saying, I know how you feel. And the relief that came from that there was somebody else that gambled the same way as I did and had this terrible critic inside their head telling them how awful they were. And there was help. And for me, it was, I'd made that decision I wanted to take the help, and someone was showing me how to get the help because I didn't know where it was until that point. So that was how I accessed the services. For me also to be part of a group moving forward is that sort of community of women moving forward together gives you the strength to carry on.
I wonder, is there, because both of you, or all of you, have spoken about the stereotype of mum has no weaknesses, and mum's the person who smooths over everyone else's problems, so she's not allowed to have any problems herself. Do you think that affects the way that a woman might gamble on average? So do the ways that men gamble on average differ from the methods by which women would gamble?
Yes.
Lisa, you seem to have thoughts.
I do, because certainly with online gambling, on your phone gambling, people don't know you're doing it. If you go to a betting shop, the majority of people there are men. If you go to a bingo hall, which is seen as a kind of subtle way of gambling, you know, there's a stereotype for the people that go to bingo. What they don't look is the fruit machines and how much you can gamble on those fruit machines in bingo halls. But I think certainly through lockdown, and for parents that have children that are in bed and, you know, carers, you've got access to it online. And it's a huge grip.
Yeah.
And that online gambling, it's quite secretive. You can do it from home.
And you can presumably do it whilst
Anywhere.
you put a wash on.
Absolutely, you can do it anywhere.
I was reflecting on what we learned in the series of New Beginnings, and one of the things that shocked me the most and really made me angry actually was where we had a couple of contributors talk about how men in recovery are in many ways given more opportunities and given more resources. Lisa, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I feel like we need to focus on that more.
Yeah, I think like, you know, for men, obviously we've already spoken about Gamblers Anonymous. You know, that's out there. I think treatment centres, you know, rehab centres, their programs are designed a lot longer you know, compared to women. Like, I know one of the programs is, I think, 10 to 12 weeks, whereas a lot of women wouldn't be able to access 10 to 12 weeks of going away, especially if they've got sort of, you know, children or caring responsibilities, or just, you know, they're a mum or whatever, they're, you know, a wife, and they can't have that time away. Also, I just think because it's more normalised for men to gamble, I think it's, you know, we look, as society, we look at the way sort of men gamble, and it's almost saying, well, that's normal. Going to football on a Saturday afternoon, going down the pub with your mates, like, let's all have a bet, you know. And it's that. But with women, and we haven't touched upon this today, but I think it's important to say that I put on so many different masks when I was gambling. So if my husband walked through the door and I'd had a really crap day, then my mask went on and I'd had an all right day. And I was like, I had this, I could have won an Oscar for my acting, because I had to hide behind that mask, because deep down inside I was dying. And apart from Gamblers Anonymous, I didn't know, there wasn't at the time anything for women. And it was just all around men getting help. And that's when I thought, like especially during lockdown, you know, like Lisa said, how easy is it now to get on the internet and access gambling? And there needs to be a lot more sort of treatment centres, and there needs to be a lot more education and research done about women and gambling, and giving women the opportunities to become involved in different programs, and having that sort of maintaining that sort of recovery and the aftercare, which it takes a lot. You know, it's not just for 10 weeks. It's for life. And having that, you know, getting that balance.
Did you both feel that it would have been easier for you to seek help if you'd been a man?
Yeah,
Definitely.
100%. It's been more accepted.
Right.
And I think when I went into rehab, I was offered 6 weeks, but I noticed that all the men that were in for gambling, they went to my rehab and then they went off somewhere else for an extended period of time,
Right,
to deal with the gambling stuff more. Whereas I got 6 weeks and I wasn't allowed to go to the other place because I was a girl. So, do you know what I mean? So there was a big difference there. So yeah, I would have got a lot more therapy on whatever the other place had to offer, but I was limited to what I was offered, and it didn't go beyond that for me as a woman, but it did for the men. And I just think people have more compassion and empathy for a man that's a gambling addict, whereas a woman, I've been asked, you know, well, how do you get a gambling addiction? Ain't you busy? And you got you got like to be a mum. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course I can be a gambling addict.
so people assumed it was just because you were bored.
Yeah. And it's not about boredom, or it's not about money. It's about escapism. I couldn't think about the things that I had going on. It was the only way to blank all of that out, and that's why I'm a gambling addict.
It strikes me, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you all agree with each other. And throughout the series as well, I noticed that on the mic and off the mic, you all had such a lovely relationship with each other. You know, you're all different ages, from different parts of the country, different backgrounds, but it does feel like a sisterhood that you share. I mean, how important are those relationships with other women in terms of the recovery process?
I think along with any addiction comes a very deep-seated loneliness and a very deep-seated sense of being alone. And when you connect with other people, it's like, oh my God, thank goodness, there's people that understand. But as humans, we need to connect with others. And that identification, I think, makes you feel very united. And it is like a sisterhood, it really is. Because underneath all of that is that terrible loneliness and shame.
Is there, I wonder, a stereotype about women and gambling that you hear all the time? So I'm reflecting on what you said, Kiki, about people saying, aren't you busy? And you've obviously heard that a lot because it's stuck in your mind. Is there a stereotype that you're like, I just wish that would die? You know, it's not true, but people believe it.
I think the bingo hall is definitely one. Your nan down the bingo hall. And, gambling is something that men do. It's much more acceptable for men to be gambling than women. And it's seen as a weakness. And God, she doesn't put her family first, does she, if she gambles? There's very much, it's the responsibility of the woman in the house to... And it feels like they believe you're neglecting your family and your family duties, and that isn't what it's about at all.
And also, I think it's more okay if you are down the bingo hall gambling, because that's seen like a mum's night out. Right. You go out with your mum, your sister and your friends, and you go down the bingo and it's all fun. But when it's in the bookies or a betting shop or slots, it's seen completely different. There's still that judgment of it being completely different types of gambling. Yeah. It's more acceptable to go down a bingo than it is to be indoors gambling on your phone when you're completely isolated and alone.
And I think also another stereotype is like what Kiki said, women at the bingo, but yet I was at horse races, dog racing, football matches, playing poker, and everywhere I went, it was all men. So every place that I went on my own, I would say 90% of the dog meetings, the horse racing meetings, the playing the poker at casinos, I would be sitting with, I would say 90% men. And that's again, and I know women that like talk to me and they say, we are betting on sports. We go to the horse races, and they're like me. But again, that's just that stereotype. Or it's the man that goes to the horse racing. It's the man that plays poker. How can a woman play poker? And it's not true. Well, I know it's not true because I used to sit with all the men and get onto the final table, and I used to hate it because I was such a good bluffer. And but yeah, it's just we've got to change that.
The other thing that really stuck with me from doing the series is it's not that I wasn't aware of gambling addiction before. I was sort of peripherally aware, but it wasn't on my radar before. And then I came away from doing this series and just existing in the world, I started to notice things like, oh, that bus stop has got an advert for gambling. Oh, there's scratch cards behind the till in the supermarket. Oh, I'm on social media, a little advert's popped up for gambling on TV. It's everywhere. We're swimming in this stuff. And because it's not something that's touched my life before, I just wasn't tuned into it before. And I thought, wow, if I was in recovery from gambling addiction, I would be being triggered constantly. I mean, how do you survive in this world without that, or without allowing yourself to be triggered in that way?
It's so hard, Natasha. Like you said, it's everywhere. That is probably the biggest thing at the moment for women, is they talk to me about the advertising and saying, like, is there anything you can do? Like, as if I've got this magic power. I wish I did have, I haven't. I would say that try to go to, your local provider, because I do know after speaking to Lisa and Kiki today, you can block certain adverts off your TV. You've got a sort of everything you can just sort of cross off: Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Just keep clicking. If you get triggered, you need to reach out to somebody. If you're watching the telly and an advert comes up, switch the telly on a different channel. It is like you said, we can't get away from it. And I do think that the government needs to sort of do something about this. I think it is a massive public health issue. I've said it time and time again. You wouldn't see somebody taking drugs on national TV during the day. You wouldn't see someone sitting with a bottle of whiskey getting drunk on national TV, but yet we're all like seeing these adverts which are before the watershed.
Well, even junk food advertising, they're trying to stop that being shown to kids.
I know, but yet gambling is for over 18s, and yet under 18s are being exposed to it. They're being exposed to it all the time. Like you said, buses, everyone's on social media nowadays, and it's a huge platform, but yet because they're making millions, from it doesn't seem to be at the moment like this problem, which it is. and it's going to take years and years for advertising to get off the TV. But I said it last time, it will go off. You know, why has it all got to take time? And you know, we're already in crisis with gambling.
Well, with my mental health campaigner hat on, for me, this speaks to there's still this massive disparity between physical health harms and mental health harms, because they will act quickly on alcohol and cigarettes and junk food because they affect people physically. With gambling addiction, it's seen as being more in the realm of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not seen as a public health crisis in the same way as those other examples are.
No. But yeah, I sat on a Gamble Aware panel with Sir Chris Whitty, and he spoke about it, saying this is going to become a public health issue. You know, now that was 3 years ago. I think I sat with him on that panel, and again, 3 years later, we're getting, you know, and the other thing is, the celebrities that are advertising these highly addictive products are not realising that it's causing a lot of pain and trauma and triggering for a lot of people out there. And not just people that are addicted to gambling. I've got affected others now saying to me, like you said, I wasn't really aware of it, the gambling, until I really started listening to New Beginnings. And it's like my family who don't really understand about gambling addiction. But then because of what I do, they're like ringing me up going, every other advert's gambling. And all my mates are saying, every radio station I'm listening to, there's a gambling ad or there's that ad. And it's becoming more aware. And I think the only thing we can do is just keep sort of trying to raise awareness and seeing if they can, I don't know, if we can like subscribe to something to block all these adverts and not see them.
So now we have some listener questions. We put a call out on social media asking listeners to New Beginnings to send in questions. And we've got a couple here that I'm going to ask you to have a go at answering, if that's okay. So Soraya in Glasgow asks, do I have to give my details to get support, and would I have to tell people? My family and people at work don't know. I'm scared that people will think I'm an unfit mum and will get social services involved, and I just can't risk that. What are we saying to Soraya?
I'll start, and then Kiki and Lisa can join in. 100%, definitely reach out. You don't have to tell anybody. You know, you're on your own personal journey, and it doesn't matter if it takes 6 months, 6 years, and if you ever open up to anybody. But the main thing is that you reach out for that help first of all, and then once you've reached out, you know, all we do is, you know, we take your name and your email address, and then we sign you up, and we do some sort of questions around your mental health, and we do the PGSI score, which is the Problem Gambling Severity Index, just measuring your gambling harms. And then once you've done that, that's it, you're signed up. And there isn't any, you know, if you haven't told anybody, there's no force to tell people. It's just, I told people eventually. It took me 16 years, but eventually I did open up, and it was the best thing that I did for myself, because it was that huge weight lifted off my shoulders, and then I could actually be me and stop being secretive about everything. But Lisa and Kiki have probably got their own sort of how long it took you to open up and what you would.
Yeah, my daughter always knew that I gambled, but she'd never knew to the level of that I gambled. My family don't know that I gamble even now. I opened up to my daughter because I know how secretive I can be around it. That's the nature of addiction. Of course, and I think it's so sad, you've got the stigma that, you know, God, social services is going to get involved, I'm going to lose my children. You know, addiction doesn't make you a bad mother. And if you reach out to the right people that can help you, it can be confidential. You know, it isn't an expose. It's like, I've got a problem, I need some help. And it doesn't make you a bad mother.
Were you pleasantly surprised by people's reactions when you did eventually open up to them, Kiki?
Yes, 100%, because everybody knew that I gambled. It wasn't something that I kind of hid, but I don't think nobody understood how bad it was or how dark it had gotten for me, and how close to losing my life I was at that point. But for the majority, everyone's been so incredibly supportive. I talk about my addiction and my recovery online anyway, and I think it just takes some of the fear away for me. But I get a lot of supportive messages and a lot of people asking questions to come into the gambling space. A lot of women are asking me about it. I give out self-referrals and things like that all the time, and just let them know that it's a safe space to do so. Do you know what I mean? And especially with different ethnicities and stuff, just letting them know that you know, you might not see somebody that looks like you, but I promise you that there is people trying to make a change to that, you know, and it's a safe place to go, and there's not much judgment as what I thought there would be. And yeah, being in this space has took a lot away of my own inside shame and guilt, to be honest.
So I hope that that's comforting for Soraya to hear that. I sense that all of you probably felt similarly to her before you reached out for help, but you're all so grateful that you did.
Most people are grateful that you're getting help.
Yeah.
If they care about you. There isn't a judgment. They just are very grateful that you're actually reaching out and getting help.
And then we have another question, which is from Laura in Manchester. She says, I have a friend who gambles. She used to go to arcades, but lately she's always playing games on her phone and she is always struggling for money. I want to help her, but I don't know how to start the conversation without offending her. Any ideas how I can do this? This is a really interesting question, I think. Does anyone have thoughts?
For me, I think I would just arrange a dinner or something. It was like my best friend, and I'll just say, look, I noticed that you're gambling a lot more and you're always on your phone. Like, is there something you want to talk about? Or I would try and research what was available as well, so I can give her different kind of options to think about, but also make it very clear, like, it's her choice. I'm just here to support her and that I love her and that there's no judgment from me. But I'm here when she's ready to talk about it or ready to get help. It's what I've done with friends in the past for different things. So that's what I think works best for the people that I know and love.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a pretty perfect response. And also having the support there just in case your friend goes, thank goodness someone's noticed. Yes, I would like help. And you can signpost then immediately. When you think back to the responses that you had from friends and family, is there anything that was said to you that was particularly helpful?
I think certainly for me was, I thought it was all in secret and nobody was noticing. And when I started to realise people were noticing, I felt like I'd been exposed. And certainly when people said there's no judgment, but, you know, we think maybe you need some help, it was the fact there was no judgment that was the best thing for me, because my own head was judging me very harshly. And actually it wasn't the same judgment from other people.
I think the best thing that when I came out with my story was that my mum and my husband actually went along to Gam-Anon to find out more about the addiction because they didn't understand it. And I think it's really hard for affected others to understand about the addiction, because if you're not going through it, you haven't really got any idea, and you're seeing your loved ones really struggling, and that's really hard pill to swallow for anybody. And, you know, I remember when I come out with my story and my son, it was 3 years ago during lockdown, he was 25 at the time. And I said to him, like, I've got the chance to go on national TV. And he said, like, and he sat down with me and he said, Mum, if this helps one person, just one, I want you to tell your story. And the way he looked at me, and I thought, like, everything I've put you through growing up and seeing your mum as a gambling addict, you know, ending up in a hostel, and yet you've turned out like this, and you want me to give others hope. And I think from that day, I just thought, you know what? I don't care. I am going to tell my story, and I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. And if I can help one person, then I've done what I'm setting out to do. And I guess, you know, anyone listening today and thinking, you know, I've got a loved one or a friend or a family member, or I'm the gambler myself, you have just got to pick up that phone and reach out, because it wasn't like 15, 16 years ago when I was gambling. There's so much change going on. There's so much more out there now. There's so much people are starting to recognise that gambling is, you know, like like drugs, like alcohol, it is an addiction. And slowly but surely people are recognising that things need to change. And it is slow, but, you know, there's great organisations out there, and that's what we need to focus on, and that change is possible. And look, you know, us sitting here today, I mean, me and Kiki and Lisa would never have met if it wasn't through our gambling. So it's just so lovely that the three of us are here today, and we've met because of our gambling journeys, and we never would have met. And I've probably helped over 200 women now. And I think it's just like, it's amazing really, isn't it?
It is. And
when you
we create I've got such strong friendships in my gambling recovery space. I've got meetings that I need every week, not because of I'm going to relapse or anything like that, but just because the support and the community that we have within these groups and with women is amazing. They're not just my friends, they are my family today. And, you know, in 9 months, I've made some incredible friends, and now getting to work with some amazing women as well. It's just like you couldn't imagine it. Do you know what I mean? You really couldn't.
And it's the honesty that's shared, isn't it? It's the brutal honesty that's shared that's amazing.
So hopefully that's helpful for you, Laura. It's do your research both as to what gambling addiction is and also the help that's available out there, and listen to your friend without judgment. And that's it for this special International Women's Day edition of New Beginnings. Before we go, I've got one last question for all of you. If we were all to be sitting around this table 1 year from now, what is the one thing that you would like to see changed for better awareness for gambling support for women? Shall I start with Lisa W?
100% an advert on the TV saying, with all different faces, saying gambling doesn't discriminate and this is the help out there. And there's a list of every organisation that's out there for men and women that are struggling and affected others with gambling harms. That would be a dream come true for me.
Yeah, I think sort of drive the message home that it's not a moral issue, because I think a lot of people think it is. You know, why don't you just stop? So I think it's not a moral issue. It's something that goes on in our brains. And stop the advertising.
Kiki?
I think one would be that it's not about money. I really would like to see more gamblers who are suffering with gambling harm who betted low amounts of money, because I think people would realise they had a problem if they didn't just see the remortgaging and selling cars kind of aspect of being an addict.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to see more people that look like me in different ethnic minorities on Google when you're first start typing in about gambling harm, instead of the gambling companies all coming up. If someone says gambling harm, then it should be seeing people who's in recovery, lived experience of gambling harm as a point of contact, you know, like New Beginnings and all other resources. So that'd be cool.
Those were all really brilliant answers. Thank you so much. A huge thank you to Lisa and Kiki for joining us through this very special episode. If you've been affected by any of the topics covered in today's episode, please contact the National Gambling Helpline on 0808 8020 133 for 24/7 support, or visit betnomoreuk.org to learn more about the New Beginnings service. If you found today's episode helpful, please feel free to like, comment and share. You can listen to the New Beginnings podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. To watch all episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Bet No More UK. I'm Natasha Devon. Thank you for coming along on this exploration with me as we uncover the complexities of gambling and its far-reaching effects. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback for the show, or if there are any subjects you think that we should cover in future episodes. You can reach us through social media or contact us directly at social@betnomoreuk.org. Thanks.